Hello and welcome back to Jules Math Tools. In our session today, we are learning how to convert a decimal in the tens place into a proper fraction. So if you're ready, let's get started. In our example that we're going to begin with today, we're going to be converting our decimal number 1/10 into a proper fraction. So to begin, I'm going to first change this decimal into its word form. And in words, remember that we look at the decimal's position in that number in order to change it into its word form. So with my decimal number that I have, my number is 1 and it's in the tens position, so my word form would be 1/10. Now with looking at this number in its word form, there are two key things you need to remember. One is that decimal numbers are greatly related to fractional numbers when written in words. So when taking my words 1/10, remember that the second thing that you need to remember is that your number 1 represents your number in the numerator. Remember, in fractions, whenever we're changing our fraction into word form, the numerator number is always written just as it is. And this denominator is always written in a decimal form to say, because we know tenth is a decimal form. So the number in the denominator is always written with that TH at the end. So it's the same thing with our decimal number. So because we have the number 1, and that 1 is in the tens position of our number, our word form is 1/10, where 1 represents my numerator and the tens represent my number that's in the denominator. So my fraction form of 1/10 will be 1/10 or 1/10, as some people usually say, but we know that the correct way is 1/10. So that will be my fraction form. So let's look at the next example. We're going to be changing our number on the screen into its fractional form. Now I want you to begin by writing this number out in its word form, because if you can write it in its word form, it should be a little bit easier for you to convert it into its fraction form. And the good thing with decimal numbers when you're changing it into fractional form is that for the most part, all of them would always have that denominator of a tenth form. It'll always be a 10, a 100, a 1,000. So that's the good thing about changing decimal numbers into fractional form. We'll always have the denominator of a 10 unless we have to simplify the fraction, and then in that case it would change. So my decimal number in its word form would be 6/10. Again, I have the number 6, and that 6 is in the tens position in my number, so my word form is simply 6/10. And remember that when looking at 6/10, remember that 6 represents your numerator and the tens represents your denominator. So my fractional form for this number would be 6/10 or 6/10, which is technically not the correct way, but 6/10. 6 in the numerator, 10 in my denominator. Now with this fraction in this case, we can't simplify this fraction. And this fraction can be simplified by dividing by 2. So both parts of my fraction can be divided by 2 without a remainder. So I'm going to simplify my fraction by dividing by 2. And we know that 6 divided by 2 will give us 3, and 10 divided by 2 will give us 5. So my fraction in its lowest term is 3/5. Okay, so I hope that this video is very helpful for you. I hope it was clear and concise and was able to help you to follow along in how to convert your decimal number in the tens place into its fractional form. And remember that this is Jules Math Tools, where we make math easy.